The hook. The first clip appeared at 2:47 a.m. Pacific Time on a forum Sterling hadn't monitored in years. 93 seconds of Jimmy's monologue, the part where his smile turned predatory and Paris's face went pale under the studio lights. By morning, it had 17,000 views and counting. Sterling's hands trembled as she paused the video on Paris's expression, that exact moment when the socialite realized the interview had become an execution. The timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m., October 15, 2007, Studio 6 Billions, Camera 2. Sterling remembered standing in that control booth, watching the monitors, her headset crackling with the director's nervous commentary. She'd been 34 then, hungry and ruthless, the youngest senior producer NBC had ever hired. She'd orchestrated the whole thing like a symphony of destruction, the leaked photos timed perfectly, the questions crafted to slice deep, even the studio audience primed to laugh at all the wrong moments. The intercom had crackled in her ear. "Sterling, this is getting brutal. Should we?" "Keep rolling," she'd whispered back, watching Paris crumble on screen. "Trust me." Now, 16 years later, Sterling sat in her Malibu office at 3 a.m., her empire of secrets threatening to collapse around her. The video had been uploaded by an account called Truth Teller 2023. No profile picture, no history created yesterday. But whoever was behind it knew exactly which 93 seconds to choose. Not the obvious moments that would get the most clicks, but the specific footage that would make Sterling's blood run cold. The second clip dropped 6 hours later. This one showed what happened during the commercial break. Paris rushing off stage, Jimmy's mask slipping for just a moment as he realized he'd gone too far. And there, barely visible in the background reflection of the studio monitor, was Sterling herself, watching, orchestrating. Her secure phone buzzed. Only 7 people in the world had this number. "You seeing this?" The voice belonged to David Chen, her oldest contact at the network. His whisper carried 15 years of shared complicity. "I'm handling it," Sterling said. "Like hell you are. This is everywhere, Maggie. Entertainment blogs, Twitter, TikTok. They're calling it the lost tapes. Someone's got the full footage." Sterling's throat constricted. The full footage meant they had what happened after the cameras were supposed to stop rolling. They had Paris's breakdown in the green room. They had Jimmy's panicked call to his manager. They had the emergency meeting where network executives decided the episode would never see air. And if they had all of that, they might have the rest of the night. The part that ended with Marcus Webb, Paris's publicist, dead in his hotel room 3 blocks away. "Who else knows you're involved?" Chen pressed. "Nobody living," Sterling said automatically, then froze. Because that wasn't entirely true anymore, was it? Someone very much alive had dug up these tapes. "Jesus, Maggie, what did you do that night?" She ended the call without answering. The third clip appeared at noon, perfectly timed for maximum East Coast viewership. This one was different, not studio footage, but grainy security camera video from the NBC lobby. Sterling watched herself leaving the building at 1:23 a.m., her face grim, a manila envelope clutched in her hands. An envelope she'd thought contained every copy of that night's footage. The comments section was already exploding. "Who is the woman with the envelope?" "Producer cover-up." "This goes deeper." "Someone died that night." "Research, Marcus Webb." Sterling's blood turned to ice. How could they possibly know about Marcus? Her personal laptop chimed with a new email. The sender was Truth Teller 2023. Subject, the real story. "Margaret, remember when you told me that sometimes the truth was too dangerous for the world to handle? That some secrets were worth more than some lives? You were wrong. Tomorrow, everyone learns what Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton really did to each other that night. And what you did to Marcus Webb afterward. Sleep well. Someone you failed to protect." Sterling's hands shook so violently she couldn't hold the laptop steady. 20 years of careful distance from that world. 20 years of consulting from the shadows, keeping other people's secrets while burying her own. She'd thought she was untouchable. The signature line meant someone from her past had found her. Someone who knew about Marcus. Someone who had every reason to want her destroyed. She pulled up her contact list, scrolling through names of fixers, lawyers, digital cleanup specialists, all the people who had helped her bury inconvenient truths over the years. But this felt different, personal. Outside her Malibu windows, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, deceptively peaceful. She'd bought this house with blood money, essentially, payment for services rendered, for secrets kept, for lives destroyed in the name of entertainment. Somewhere out there, someone was hunting her, and they had 16 years of buried footage to use as ammunition. The hunt had begun. If you're following this twisted tale of buried secrets and delayed justice, drop a comment below with your theories about who's really behind those leaked tapes. And hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's chapter reveals the first name on Sterling's suspect list, and trust me, you won't see it coming. Introduction. Sterling closed the laptop with trembling fingers, the echo of that final threat reverberating through her mind. Someone you failed to protect. The words carved themselves deeper with each repetition, summoning ghosts she'd spent decades keeping buried. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 4 a.m., its brass pendulum catching the blue glow from her security monitors. 12 screens showed different angles of her Malibu estate, the winding driveway, the infinity pool reflecting moonlight, the garden where she grew herbs she'd never learned to cook with, all empty, all safe, for now. She rose from her desk, her joints protesting after hours hunched over the laptop. At 58, Sterling felt every one of those years settling into her bones like sediment. The woman who had once commanded control rooms and orchestrated careers with surgical precision now moved through her fortress of solitude, like a ghost haunting her own life. The house was too quiet. It always was. Sterling padded barefoot across Italian marble toward the kitchen, passing walls lined with awards she'd never displayed. Emmys, industry recognition, framed photographs of herself with celebrities whose secrets she'd helped bury. All of it felt like evidence now, artifacts of a life that might soon be exposed for what it really was. In the kitchen, she brewed tea she wouldn't drink and stared out at the Pacific. The ocean had been her sanctuary for 15 years, its endless rhythm a counterpoint to the chaos she'd left behind. She'd chosen this house specifically for its isolation. 3 acres of privacy, gates that kept the world at bay, and neighbors wealthy enough to mind their own business. But isolation, she was beginning to understand, might also be her weakness. No witnesses, no allies, just her and whatever storm was coming. The secure phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID made her chest tighten. Emma, mobile. Her daughter, calling at 4 a.m. from Manhattan, where she was 3 years into a journalism degree at Columbia. Sterling's greatest triumph and deepest vulnerability, wrapped into one brilliant, idealistic 21-year-old who believed her mother was a retired television producer who'd left the industry for a quieter life. Emma didn't know about Marcus Webb. She didn't know about the envelope full of footage Sterling had carried out of NBC that night. She certainly didn't know about the real reason her mother had fled Los Angeles like a refugee, building walls of money and silence around them both. Most importantly, Emma didn't know about her father. Sterling's finger hovered over the answer button. Emma only called this late when something was wrong, when the insomnia she'd inherited from her mother had taken hold. Usually, Sterling treasured these midnight conversations, rare glimpses into her daughter's world, proof that despite everything she'd raised someone good. But tonight the thought of Emma's voice made her sick with fear. Because if Truth Teller 2023 really had been digging into the past, if they really knew about that night and everything that came after. Mom? Emma's voice was soft, worried. Sterling had answered without realizing it. Hi, sweetheart. Why are you awake? I could ask you the same thing. I called the landline first. When you didn't answer, I got scared something happened. Sterling closed her eyes. Emma always called the landline first, a habit from childhood when Sterling had trained her that the secure phone was only for emergencies. But tonight, Sterling hadn't been able to leave her office, hadn't been able to step away from the screens and the threats and the carefully constructed walls that were suddenly crumbling. Just couldn't sleep, Sterling said. You know how it is. Actually, I was calling because I wanted to ask you something. Emma paused, and Sterling could picture her daughter in her cramped dorm room, probably surrounded by textbooks and the organized chaos of someone who'd inherited their mother's relentless work ethic. I'm working on this investigative piece for my journalism class about media manipulation and cover-ups in the entertainment industry. Sterling's blood turned to ice. Oh? Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Like, there are all these stories about things that got buried, careers that were destroyed behind the scenes. My professor says the best stories are often the ones that never made it to air. Emma's voice carried the excitement of someone stumbling toward a truth they couldn't possibly understand. I was wondering if you had any insights from your NBC days. Industry perspective. The irony was suffocating. Her daughter, the journalism student, hunting for buried truths about the very industry her mother had helped corrupt. Emma, who'd been raised on stories of Sterling's quiet producer past, now circling the same dark waters where Sterling had drowned her conscience 16 years ago. I wasn't really involved in anything like that, Sterling managed. I mostly worked on variety shows. Pretty standard stuff. Right, of course. Emma sounded disappointed but not suspicious. I just thought, well, you always seem to know things about how the industry really worked. You have no idea, Sterling thought, and pray you never do. Sometimes the most important thing to know, Sterling said carefully, is when to stop digging. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything Sterling couldn't say. Outside, the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, and somewhere in the growing light, her hunter was waiting. Mom, are you okay? You sound strange? Emma's voice cut through Sterling's defenses like a blade. 21 years of protecting this brilliant, idealistic daughter, and now she was investigating the very industry that had made Sterling into a monster. The cosmic cruelty of it was almost poetic. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Sterling pressed her forehead against the cool kitchen window, watching the dawn creep across the Pacific. Maybe you should focus your project on something else. Media studies can be messy territory. That's exactly why it's important, Emma said, her voice taking on that familiar tone of passionate conviction that reminded Sterling so painfully of herself at that age, before she'd learned that truth was a luxury most people couldn't afford. Professor Martinez says the best journalists are the ones willing to dig into uncomfortable territory. Professor Martinez. Sterling filed the name away automatically, a habit from her darker days when everyone was either an asset or a threat. Listen, Em, I should let you get some sleep. The doorbell echoed through the house like a gunshot. Sterling froze, her blood crystallizing in her veins. No one rang her doorbell. Ever. The gates were locked, the security system armed, and delivery drivers knew to leave packages at the gatehouse. In 15 years of self-imposed exile, exactly 3 people had stood at her front door, a lost hiker, a census worker, and the contractor who'd installed her panic room. The bell rang again, followed by 3 measured knocks. Mom, what was that? Nothing. Just... Sterling moved toward the security panel, her heart hammering against her ribs. The monitor showed the front porch in crystalline detail, a figure in a dark coat, face obscured by the shadow of the eaves, medium height, slender build, hands empty but poised, waiting. I need to go, Emma. But Mom... Sterling ended the call and activated the intercom. You're on private property. Leave immediately or I'm calling the police. The figure tilted their head, and Sterling caught a glimpse of pale skin, sharp cheekbones. A woman, maybe, or a young man. The voice that came through the speaker was artificially distorted, electronically processed. Hello, Margaret, we need to talk. The use of her full name was like ice water in her veins. Only people from her NBC days called her Margaret. Everyone else knew her as Maggie, and Emma only called her Mom. This stranger standing on her doorstep at dawn knew exactly which version of herself they were addressing. I don't know who you are, but you know exactly who I am. The distorted voice carried an edge of bitter amusement. You just haven't figured it out yet, but you will. Check your email, Margaret. I left you something special. Sterling's laptop chimed from the office, the sound carrying through the silent house like a death knell. Marcus Webb's sister sends her regards, the figure continued. She's been wondering what really happened to her brother all these years. Funny thing about suicide notes, sometimes they don't match the handwriting on old Christmas cards. The world tilted sideways. Sterling gripped the security panel to keep from falling, her vision tunneling until all she could see was that dark figure on her porch. Marcus Webb had a sister. Sterling had known that, had filed it away in the mental database she kept of potential complications. But Marcus's family had accepted the suicide ruling, had taken the settlement money Sterling had arranged through intermediaries, had buried him quietly and moved on. Except someone hadn't moved on. Someone had been investigating. Someone had been digging through 16-year-old evidence with the patience of a predator. "What do you want?" Sterling whispered. "Justice," came the processed reply. "And for you to understand what it feels like to watch your life crumble on screen while the world laughs." The figure stepped back from the door, moving with deliberate slowness toward the driveway. "Check your email, Margaret. The real show starts in 48 hours. I thought you'd want a front-row seat to your own destruction." Sterling watched the security monitor as her tormentor disappeared beyond the gate's range, leaving nothing but empty concrete and the growing certainty that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. With shaking hands, she pulled up her email. The new message from Truth Teller 2023 had no subject line, just an attachment, a video file labeled "The Night Marcus Webb Really Died." Below it, a single line of text: "You have 47 hours and 23 minutes to decide if you want to confess before I do it for you." Think of it as a professional courtesy. Sterling stared at the attachment, her finger hovering over the download button. Whatever was in that file, watching it would change everything. There would be no going back to her fortress of solitude, no more pretending the past was buried. Outside, the morning sun painted her sanctuary in golden light, beautiful and serene and utterly meaningless. Her old life was over. The only question now was whether she'd fight back or simply wait for the execution. She clicked download. The video file downloaded in seconds, but Sterling couldn't bring herself to open it. Instead, she sat frozen at her desk, watching the cursor hover over the file icon like a death sentence waiting to be read. Whatever was in that footage would shatter the last illusion of safety she'd built around herself. Her secure phone erupted in a symphony of buzzes, text messages flooding in from contacts she hadn't heard from in years. Sterling's stomach clenched as she scrolled through the notifications. Names she'd tried to forget, people whose secrets she'd helped bury, all reaching out with the same desperate urgency. "David Chen, Maggie, what the hell is happening? My assistant just got a call from someone asking about Marcus Webb. Rita Velasquez, former NBC Legal. Call me now. Someone's been digging through old NDA files. Jackson Moore, Crisis Management. Whatever you did, fix it. My phone hasn't stopped ringing." The messages kept coming, each one confirming Sterling's worst fear. Truth Teller 2023 wasn't just targeting her. They were systematically contacting everyone who'd been involved in that night 16 years ago, rattling cages Sterling had assumed were permanently sealed. She tried calling Chen back, but the line went straight to voicemail. Rita's phone did the same. Either they were swamped with damage control, or they were already cutting ties, abandoning ship before the scandal could drag them down too. Sterling understood the calculation. In their world, loyalty was a luxury that evaporated the moment it became expensive. The landline rang, its old-fashioned bell cutting through the silence like an air raid siren. Sterling stared at the caller ID unknown number. She let it ring 4 times before her training kicked in. In crisis management, information was survival, even when it hurt. "Margaret Sterling." "Miss Sterling? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the LAPD. I'm calling about Marcus Webb." Sterling's vision grayed at the edges. David Chen from NBC was one thing. Old colleagues panicking was manageable. But police involvement meant someone had filed a formal complaint, reopened a case that had been closed for 16 years. "I'm not sure I understand," Sterling said carefully. "Marcus Webb died in 2007. "Yes, ma'am, and we're taking another look at the circumstances surrounding his death. Your name came up in connection with events the night before he was found. I was hoping we could schedule a time to talk." Events the night before. The sanitized language of police reports, reducing that catastrophic evening to clinical terminology. Sterling's mind raced through possibilities. Had Truth Teller 2023 gone to the police directly? Were they working with law enforcement? Or had they simply stirred up enough noise to attract official attention? "I'd need to contact my attorney," Sterling said. The pause on the other end stretched just long enough to feel ominous. "Of course. Just so you know, we've been in contact with several other individuals from that time period. It seems there may have been some inconsistencies in the original investigation." After Detective Chen hung up, Sterling sat in the growing morning light, her sanctuary feeling more like a trap with each passing moment. The carefully constructed walls she'd built around her new life were crumbling, and the debris was threatening to bury everything she'd tried to protect. Emma called back, her voice tight with concern. "Mom, I tried calling again, but you didn't answer. Are you sure you're okay?" Sterling closed her eyes, picturing her daughter in that cramped dorm room, surrounded by journalism textbooks and dreams of uncovering important truths. The bitter irony was suffocating. Emma wanted to expose corruption in the entertainment industry, while her mother had been one of its most effective enablers. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just dealing with some old business matters." "What kind of business? You always said you were completely retired." The lie sat heavy on Sterling's tongue. She'd been telling it for so long she'd almost started believing it herself, that Margaret Sterling, the fixer who'd helped cover up Marcus Webb's murder, had died the night she fled Los Angeles. That Maggie, the reclusive consultant who lived quietly by the ocean, was someone completely different. But blood didn't wash off that easily. Truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you buried it. "Nothing important," Sterling said. "Listen, about your journalism project, maybe you should reconsider. Some stories aren't worth the cost of telling them." "Mom, you're scaring me. What's really going on?" Before Sterling could answer, her laptop chimed again. Another email from Truth-Teller 2023, this one with a subject line that made her blood freeze. "Does Emma know about her real father?" Sterling ended the call without explanation, her hands shaking as she opened the message. No text this time, just a single photograph, Emma laughing at what looked like a campus coffee shop, completely unaware that someone was watching her. The message was clear. Truth-Teller 2023 wasn't just coming for Sterling's past. They were threatening her future, and they knew exactly which pressure point would make her break. Sterling stared at the photograph of Emma until her vision blurred, the image of her daughter's innocent laughter becoming a knife twisted in her chest. 21 years of protection, of carefully constructed lies, of building walls between Emma and the truth about her parentage, all of it threatened by someone who understood exactly how to weaponize love. Her fingers moved without conscious thought, dialing a number she hadn't called in over a decade. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, gravelly with age and cigarettes. "Jesus Christ, Maggie. I was wondering when you'd call." Frank Torino, former head of NBC Security, the man who'd helped her carry Marcus Webb's body out of that hotel room. The only living person who knew every detail of that night, who'd helped orchestrate the cover-up that had saved 3 careers and destroyed Sterling's soul. "Someone's got the footage, Frank." "Yeah, I figured that out when Detective Chen called asking about hotel security tapes from 2007. His bitter laugh turned into a coughing fit. 16 years of keeping our mouths shut, and now some ghost from the past wants to play show and tell. Sterling's blood chilled. "Chen called you too?" "This morning. Wanted to know about irregularities in the original investigation. Apparently someone's been feeding the LAPD information about what really happened that night." Frank's voice dropped to a whisper. "Maggie, they know about the staged scene. They know Marcus didn't kill himself in that bathroom." The truth hit Sterling like a physical blow. Marcus Webb, rising star comedian, had died in a hotel suite surrounded by 3 of entertainment's most powerful figures. Not from an overdose, as the official report claimed. Not from suicide, as the staged scene suggested. He'd died from blunt force trauma after a confrontation gone wrong. And Sterling had spent 47 minutes turning murder into tragedy, evidence into story. "Who else knows?" Sterling asked. "Everyone who was there that night is getting visits. Richard Kellerman's already lawyered up. Amanda Cross flew to Switzerland this morning. Heard she's not coming back." Frank's breathing was labored, the sound of a man who'd spent decades drowning his conscience in alcohol and smoke. "They're picking us off one by one, Maggie. Professional, methodical. Whoever this is, they've been planning this for years. Sterling's mind raced through the implications. Richard Kellerman, the network executive who'd authorized the cover-up. Amanda Cross, the publicist who'd crafted the suicide narrative. The inner circle of corruption, now scattering like roaches when the lights came on. "Frank, I need to ask you something." Sterling's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Marcus's sister, what do you know about her? Lisa Webb? She was a kid when it happened, maybe 17. Asked a lot of questions after the funeral, but the family's lawyer shut her down pretty quick. Why? Someone mentioned her this morning. Said she'd been investigating Marcus's death." The silence stretched long enough that Sterling thought the connection had dropped. When Frank finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. "Maggie, Lisa Webb died 3 years ago. Car accident in Portland. I remember because I kept tabs on the family, figured they might cause trouble someday." He paused, the implications sinking in. If someone's claiming to speak for her, they're lying. Question is why? Sterling's sanctuary suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in with the weight of 16 years' worth of deception. Truth Teller 2023 wasn't Marcus's sister seeking justice. They were someone else entirely. Someone who'd appropriated a dead woman's grief for their own purposes. Who else knew about that night? Sterling asked. Who else could have access to the original footage? There were rumors about other recordings. Hotel security, cell phone video from party guests. We thought we'd collected everything, but... Frank's voice trailed off. There was a production assistant who got fired the next week. Some intern who'd been asking questions. But hell, that was 16 years ago. The laptop chimed again. Another email, this one with an attachment labeled simply, "Emma's father, DNA results." Sterling's world tilted off its axis. Truth Teller 2023 hadn't just been investigating Marcus Webb's death. They'd been investigating her, digging into the personal history she'd buried even deeper than the professional secrets. They knew about Emma's parentage, about the powerful married executive who'd never learned he had a daughter, about the carefully constructed lies Sterling had built to protect them both. "Frank, I have to go." "Maggie, wait. Whatever you're thinking, don't do anything stupid. This person, whoever they are, they want us to panic. They want us to make mistakes." But Sterling was already moving, her mind shifting into the cold, calculating mode that had made her so valuable to people with impossible problems. Truth Teller 2023 had made one crucial error. They'd threatened Emma. And Sterling had spent 16 years building walls around her daughter that no one, not even ghosts seeking vengeance, would be allowed to breach. She opened the DNA results with steady hands, already knowing what she'd find, already planning her counterattack. The DNA report loaded in stark black and white clinical data that shattered Sterling's world with mathematical precision, but it wasn't the confirmation of Emma's paternity that made her stomach drop. She'd known Richard Kellerman was Emma's father since the day her daughter was born. What stopped her heart was the second comparison on the page. Secondary match, 99.7% probability of familial relation, sibling. Subject, Marcus Webb, deceased. Sample source, personal effects retained in evidence storage. Sterling read the line again, then a third time, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. Emma wasn't just Richard Kellerman's daughter. She was Marcus Webb's half-sister. The room spun as memories crashed together like colliding trains. Richard's affair with that young actress in 2001. His panicked call about a situation that needed handling. Sterling had assumed he meant the usual. Tabloid photos, blackmail attempts, the standard Hollywood carnage of powerful men and ambitious women. She'd never asked the actress's name. She'd simply made the problem disappear, as she always did. Money changed hands, NDAs were signed, and the story vanished into the void of Sterling's professional discretion. But that actress, Marcus Webb's mother, the timeline fit with sickening precision. Sterling's hands shook as she pulled up old files, digital records she'd thought she'd never need again. There it was, buried in a folder marked KR 2000 and one personal subject, Diane Webb, 23, struggling actress. One-night encounter with client. Requesting standard cleanup protocol. Diane Webb, Marcus's mother. The woman Sterling had paid $50,000 to disappear from Richard's life, never knowing she was carrying his child. Truth Teller 2023's message appeared on screen like a death sentence. Did you enjoy the family reunion? Must be awkward, realizing you helped cover up the murder of your daughter's brother. Richard Kellerman destroyed both his children, one through neglect, one through violence. And you made it all possible. The words hit like physical blows. Sterling had orchestrated the cover-up that protected Richard Kellerman, the man who'd killed his own son without knowing it. She'd helped him escape justice for murdering the half-brother Emma would never meet. Her secure phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the news. Your 47 hours just became 47 minutes. Sterling's laptop automatically refreshed to her news feeds, and the headline that loaded made her vision tunnel. Exclusive new evidence emerges in 2007 death of comedian Marcus Webb. Police reopen investigation. The article was already viral, trending across social media platforms with the speed of digital wildfire. But it wasn't the police investigation that made Sterling's blood freeze. It was the byline. By Emma Sterling, Columbia School of Journalism. Sterling's daughter, her brilliant, idealistic daughter, had written the exposé that would destroy them both. The article was meticulously researched, devastating in its clarity. Hotel records that proved Marcus hadn't been alone when he died, witness statements that contradicted the suicide narrative, forensic inconsistencies that had been buried for 16 years. Emma had found the truth, and she had no idea she was writing about her own family. Sterling's phone exploded with incoming calls. Reporters, former colleagues, crisis managers all sensing blood in the water. But she ignored them all, her focus laser-sharp on the final paragraph of Emma's article. Sources close to the original investigation suggest that evidence may have been deliberately suppressed by individuals with connections to NBC Entertainment. The LAPD has declined to comment on whether any suspects have been identified, but Detective Sarah Chen confirmed that several persons of interest are being contacted for questioning. This reporter will continue following this story as it develops. The cruelest irony was that Emma's work was brilliant, exactly the kind of investigative journalism that exposed corruption and held powerful people accountable. Under any other circumstances, Sterling would have been proud. Instead, she watched her daughter unknowingly light the fuse that would destroy both their lives. Her laptop chimed one final time. Truth Teller 2023's message was brief. You thought you were protecting her by hiding the truth, but Emma's been hunting her own brother's killer all along. How's that for justice? Sterling stared at the screen, finally understanding the true scope of her tormentor's revenge. This wasn't just about Marcus Webb's death. It was about the generational damage caused by buried secrets, about how lies poisoned everything they touched. Emma would learn that her mother was complicit in covering up a murder. She'd discover that the network executive she'd been investigating was her father. And worst of all, she'd realize that her quest for truth had led her to expose her own family's darkest secret. Truth Teller 2023 hadn't just threatened to destroy Sterling's life. They'd engineered it so that Sterling's own daughter would be the instrument of that destruction. The hunter had become the hunted, and Emma would learn the cost of seeking truth in a family built on lies. Sterling sat motionless in her chair, Emma's article still glowing on the laptop screen, like an indictment written in her daughter's own hand. The morning light streaming through the windows felt harsh now, exposing every shadow she'd tried to hide in. 21 years of careful construction, gone. 16 years of buried secrets, excavated by the one person she'd tried hardest to protect. The secure phone rang again. This time she answered. You're running out of time, Margaret. The voice was different now. Not the electronic disguise of their previous communications, but natural, familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. Emma's about to get a phone call that will change everything. Who are you? Sterling's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. Someone you should have protected instead of him. The caller's laugh was bitter hollow. You made a choice that night, Margaret. Richard Kellerman's reputation over Marcus Webb's life, power over justice. And now, Emma gets to live with the consequences of your decision. Sterling's mind raced through possibilities, cycling through every face from that night 16 years ago. The hotel staff, the party guests, the production crew, anyone who might have witnessed what really happened in that suite. But this felt deeper, more personal than simple witness testimony. What do you want? What I wanted was justice. But that ship sailed when you helped stage Marcus's suicide. Now I want something much simpler. I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything because someone else decided your truth wasn't worth protecting." The line went dead, leaving Sterling alone with the weight of revelation. She opened a new browser window and began typing, her fingers moving with muscle memory across familiar keys. If someone was about to destroy her life, she needed to know who. The skills that had made her invaluable to Hollywood's elite hadn't disappeared. They'd just been dormant. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Something big is happening with my story. Can you call me?" Sterling stared at the message, her heart fracturing. In minutes, maybe seconds, Emma would learn that her investigation had led her straight to her own family's darkest moment. The excitement in her daughter's text, the thrill of a young journalist on the verge of a breakthrough, would soon turn to horror. Another text arrived. "Detective Chen wants to interview me about my sources." "This is really happening, Mom. This could change everything. This could change everything. If Emma only knew how right she was." Sterling's fingers hovered over the keyboard, a dozen responses forming and dissolving in her mind. She could warn Emma, try to prepare her for what was coming. She could deflect, delay, buy herself time to find another solution. Or she could finally tell the truth after 16 years of lies. Before she could decide, her laptop chimed with a new email. The subject line made her blood freeze. "Final gift. Emma's real father wants to meet her." The message contained a single attachment, a video file labeled "Richard Kellerman, Tonight Show Green Room, Yesterday." Sterling's hand trembled as she clicked play. The footage was clearly taken without Richard's knowledge, shot from a hidden camera in NBC's green room. Richard sat alone, scrolling through his phone, looking older and more fragile than she remembered. Then Emma's article loaded on his screen, and Sterling watched her former lover's face transform as he read his son's name. "Jesus Christ," Richard whispered to the empty room, his voice barely audible. "Marcus Webb." That was Diane's boy. His phone slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers as the full implication hit him. "I killed my own son." The video continued for another 30 seconds. Richard collapsing into a chair, his face cycling through denial, horror, and finally devastating acceptance. When it ended, Sterling found herself staring at a black screen that reflected her own haunted expression. Truth Teller 2023's final message appeared. He figured it out. Just like Emma will in about 10 minutes. Funny how truth has a way of surfacing, isn't it? 21 years of protecting her from knowing her father is a murderer, and now she gets to discover it on live television. Richard's doing a press conference in 5 minutes. He's going to confess everything. Sterling's world tilted as the full scope of the trap became clear. Truth Teller 2023 hadn't just exposed the cover-up. They'd orchestrated a perfect storm of revelation. Emma would watch her biological father confess to murder on live television, learning her parentage and her brother's identity in the most public, humiliating way possible. The phone rang. Emma's number. Sterling looked at her daughter's name on the caller ID and realized this would be the last conversation they'd ever have as the people they'd been. After this call, everything would be different. Emma would know the truth about her father, her brother, and her mother's complicity in hiding a murder. The idealistic journalism student would discover that her own family embodied everything she'd dedicated her career to exposing. With a steady hand, Sterling answered the phone, finally ready to stop running from the truth she'd buried in that hotel room 16 years ago. "Emma." Sterling's voice was steady, belying the earthquake in her chest. "Before you say anything, I need you to know that I love you more than my own life." "Mom?" Emma's voice carried excitement mixed with confusion. "That's okay, but I'm calling about something incredible. My Marcus Webb investigation. Mom, I think I've uncovered something huge. There's going to be a press conference in a few minutes, and Detective Chen says—" "Emma, stop." The words came out sharper than Sterling intended. Through her window, she could see the first news van pulling up to her gate. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever you think you've discovered, whatever press conference you're about to watch, I need you to come home. Now." "Mom, you're not making sense. This is the biggest story of my career. Richard Kellerman from NBC is about to make some kind of statement about the Marcus Webb case. My editor thinks it might be connected to my article. I can't leave now." Sterling closed her eyes. feeling the last 16 years of her life collapsing like a house of cards. Emma, Richard Kellerman is your father. The silence stretched across the phone line like a chasm. Sterling could hear her daughter's breathing, quick and shallow, the sound of a world reshaping itself around an impossible truth. That's not, Mom, what are you talking about? My father died before I was born. You told me. I lied. The admission tasted like ashes. Richard Kellerman is your biological father, and Marcus Webb was your half-brother. The story you've been investigating, the murder you've been trying to expose. Emma, you've been hunting the truth about your own family. Sterling's laptop screen flickered to life with a live news feed. Richard Kellerman stood behind a podium at NBC headquarters, his face the color of cemetery stone. The Chiron read breaking NBC executive to make statement on Marcus Webb case. Turn on the news, Sterling said quietly. Channel 7. She heard Emma fumbling with a remote, the background sound of a television clicking on. Then her daughter's sharp intake of breath as Richard's image filled the screen. I need to make a statement about the death of comedian Marcus Webb in 2007, Richard began, his voice hollow. I have recently learned information that compels me to take full responsibility for what happened that night. Sterling watched her daughter's biological father destroy himself on live television, each word a nail in the coffin of the life she'd carefully constructed. Richard's confession was methodical, devastating. The argument that had escalated beyond control, Marcus's head striking the marble table edge, the panic that had led to a cover-up instead of an ambulance call. Oh God, Emma whispered through the phone. Oh God, Mom, he's confessing to murder. This is exactly what my investigation suggested. But I never thought, how could you possibly know about? The realization hit her mid-sentence. Sterling could hear the exact moment her brilliant daughter connected the dots, the timing, the inside knowledge, her mother's inexplicable familiarity with Hollywood's darkest corners. You were there. Emma's voice had gone flat, emotionless. You were there that night. Yes, you helped cover it up. Sterling looked at her reflection in the laptop screen, seeing finally the woman she'd become, someone who'd chosen power over truth, protection over justice, silence over her own daughter's right to know her family's history. Yes, my brother is dead. Emma's voice cracked on the word brother. My father killed him, and you helped him get away with it. I was trying to protect. Don't. The word came out like a gunshot. Don't you dare say you were protecting me. You were protecting him. You were protecting your career, your reputation, your precious client list. And now I find out that I've spent months investigating my own brother's murder, never knowing he existed, never knowing that the monster I was trying to expose was my own father. Sterling heard Emma's tears now, raw sobs that cut through 16 years of careful justification. Her daughter, her brilliant principled daughter, would never forgive this. How could she? Emma had built her entire identity around seeking truth and justice, only to discover that her mother was the architect of the very corruption she dedicated her life to fighting. Emma, please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Emma's voice had gone cold, distant. You chose him over Marcus. You chose lies over truth. And you chose to let me spend my entire adult life hunting for answers you could have given me at any time. The line went dead. Sterling set down the phone and watched Richard Kellerman finish destroying both their lives on national television. Through her windows, she could see more news vans arriving, reporters setting up cameras, the circus of exposure that she'd spent her career helping others avoid. Truth Teller 2023 had won completely. They'd orchestrated not just the revelation of a 16-year-old crime, but the destruction of every relationship Sterling valued. Emma would never trust her again. Richard would likely face murder charges, and Sterling would finally face the consequences of choosing silence over truth. The house phone rang, reporters, no doubt, ready to feast on the carcass of her reputation. But Sterling didn't answer. She simply sat in her sanctuary, watching the life she'd built crumble into dust, finally understanding that some truths could never be buried deeply enough. 3 months later, Sterling sat in the same chair where her world had ended, but the view had changed completely. The media circus had long since moved on to fresher scandals, leaving behind only the permanent alteration of her landscape, both literal and metaphorical. The Malibu house felt smaller now, stripped of its illusion of sanctuary. She'd fired the security company, disconnected the elaborate monitoring systems, removed the barriers she'd once thought necessary. There seemed little point in protecting a life that no longer existed. The morning routine had become simpler: coffee, silence, and the weight of consequence. No phones rang with crisis management emergencies. No clients sought her particular brand of damage control. The woman who'd once orchestrated Hollywood's most delicate cover-ups had become unemployable the moment Richard Kellerman's confession aired. Richard was awaiting trial for involuntary manslaughter. The prosecution had offered a plea deal, 8 years with possibility of parole in 5. His attorney had advised him to take it. At 63, Richard would emerge from prison an old man, his career and reputation permanently destroyed. Sterling had received exactly one communication from him since the press conference, a handwritten letter containing only 5 words, "I'm sorry for all of it." She'd burned the letter without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter. The identity of Truth-Teller 2023 had never been revealed. After Richard's confession, they'd simply vanished, their purpose apparently fulfilled. Sterling suspected it had been someone close to Marcus, a friend, a lover, perhaps a family member she'd never known existed. It didn't matter now. Justice, delayed but not denied, had found its own way to the surface. Emma's investigative article had won a Polk Award for journalism. The citation praised her relentless pursuit of truth in the face of institutional corruption and personal cost. Sterling had read the announcement online, feeling pride and devastation in equal measure. Her daughter had achieved everything she'd dreamed of, but at the cost of learning that her own mother embodied the corruption she'd dedicated her life to exposing. They hadn't spoken since that final phone call. Sterling had written letters, dozens of them, but never sent a single one. What words could bridge the chasm between them? How do you apologize for stealing someone's brother, their truth, their ability to trust the person who raised them? Emma had built her career on the foundation that justice mattered more than comfort, that truth was worth any personal cost. Her mother's silence had made a mockery of everything she believed. The doorbell rang, a sound so foreign now that Sterling almost didn't recognize it. She'd stopped answering unexpected visitors months ago, process servers, reporters, the occasional curiosity seeker drawn by her infamy. But when she looked through the window, her breath caught. Emma stood on the doorstep, looking older than her 25 years. Her dark hair was longer, pulled back in a style that made her look more like Margaret Sterling than either of them would probably admit. She carried herself differently now, the eager energy of youth tempered by knowledge that some truths carried unbearable weight. Sterling opened the door without speaking. They looked at each other across the threshold, 2 women forever changed by secrets that had finally surfaced. "I came to tell you that I'm writing a book," Emma said finally. "About Marcus, about the cover-up, about what happens when justice gets buried for 16 years. She paused, her voice steady but strained. "I'm going to include everything. Richard, the hotel, the staged suicide, and your part in it." Sterling nodded. "You should. It's your story to tell. I wanted to give you the chance to respond. On the record. What would you like me to say?" Emma's composure cracked slightly. "I'd like you to say that you're sorry, that you regret choosing his reputation over Marcus's life, that you understand how your silence stole my brother from me before I even knew he existed." Sterling looked at her daughter, brilliant, principled, forever scarred by the truth she'd uncovered. "I am sorry, Emma, more than you can possibly know. But my regret won't bring Marcus back, and it won't repair what I broke between us." They stood in silence, the Pacific stretching endlessly behind them. Finally, Emma turned to leave, then stopped. "I loved you, you know. Before all this, I loved you more than anyone in the world." "I know," Sterling whispered. "I loved you too. I still do." Emma walked away without looking back, leaving Sterling alone with the ruins of her choices. She closed the door and returned to her chair, understanding finally that some damages were irreparable, some truths too devastating to survive. The house felt different now, not like a sanctuary, but like what it had always been, a place where someone who'd chosen silence over justice lived with the consequences of that choice. The view remained beautiful, but Sterling no longer saw refuge in it. She saw only the endless horizon of a life permanently changed by the weight of buried secrets finally brought to light.